Welcome back, everyone, to Wisdom Unveiled. Before we get started, just a reminder, this deep dive is based on translated conversations with Iranian philosophers. And, translations, sometimes things get lost in the mix, so we apologize for any discrepancies there. We're on episode 23 out of 50 in our journey through Marifat, and today we're going to be focusing on the wisdom of Saadi of Shiraz. There's this really interesting story from Saadi's time in Baalbek, where he was surrounded by all these people, but they just weren't getting it. You know what I mean? They couldn't connect with his teachings. It's kind of a powerful example of this paradox Saadi wrestled with in a lot of his work, this idea of distant nearness. What were your thoughts on this concept? And what about the story from Baalbek? What insights did you get from that?
Well, it's fascinating. You have Saadi surrounded by all these people, but he feels totally alone. And I think it just highlights that just because you're physically close to someone doesn't mean you're actually connected. Like, we can be right next to each other, but mentally and emotionally miles apart.
It's like when you're at a party, right? You're surrounded by people, but you still feel completely isolated.
Exactly. Saadi describes the people in Baalbek as asorda, which is often translated as just depressed, but I think it means something more. It's this closed-off state of being, this inner stagnation that prevents them from really receiving his wisdom. It's as if they were training beasts or holding a mirror to the blind.
There's some really strong imagery there. Do you think Saadi felt like he was wasting his time, like trying to teach these people that just weren't ready to listen?
I mean, it's totally understandable to feel that way, right? But Saadi, he connects this experience to a verse from the Quran. We are nearer to him than his jugular vein. And he's suggesting that just as God is always near, wisdom and meaning are available to us too. But it's really our own receptivity, our willingness to open ourselves up, that determines whether we can perceive and connect with them.
So it's not enough to just be physically present. You have to be mentally and emotionally open as well. It really makes you think how many times we miss opportunities for connection because we're not truly present.
All the time. We get so caught up in our thoughts and our distractions, and we fail to truly see and hear the people around us. Saad contrasts this with Waqt. It's a concept that goes beyond chronological time.
Walk, huh? I like that. How is that different from regular time?
So think of Waqt as like the special moment, an opening where genuine connection becomes possible, It's like that spark of understanding, that meeting of minds where ideas are flowing. You're both present in the conversation.
Like when you click with someone in conversation and time kind of melts away, you're just completely absorbed. Saadi seems to be saying that we need to cultivate those Waqt moments if we want to experience true connection.
He is. And he also warns us about something he calls hypocrisy. And he sees this hypocrisy as a big obstacle to achieving that genuine connection.
Okay, hypocrisy. Why would that be a barrier to connecting with others?
He sees hypocrisy as like this spiritual pollution, something that clouds our hearts and minds and prevents us from seeing ourselves and the world clearly. I mean, he uses powerful imagery. He writes about the stench of hypocrisy reaching the heavens. What he's saying is when we're not true to ourselves, we create this barrier that makes it difficult for others to connect with us.
So it's not just about like straight up lying, but those more subtle ways we distort ourselves to fit in or to please other people, or even inflate our own egos. It's really interesting that Saadi was writing about this so long ago, but it feels incredibly relevant now, especially with social media. So it's like, are we presenting this idealized version of ourselves online instead of being genuine?
It's a question worth asking. Saadi was concerned about the disconnect between our inner and outer selves. He believed that hindered our ability to access deeper wisdom. He uses this metaphor of dust and fire to explain how we can overcome hypocrisy.
Dust and fire. Okay, tell me more.
Okay, so picture dust. It represents that pure original state, like the essence of who we are at our core. It's like a symbol of our potential, our innate goodness.
Right. And then you have fire. Fire represents all those forces inside us. Passions, desires, ego. These are powerful energies that can drive us, but also lead us astray if we don't know how to manage them.
So it's not that fire's inherently bad, but it has the potential to cause damage if we don't learn to control it.
Exactly. Saadi believed we have a choice. We can let those inner fires consume us and lead to those hypocritical behaviors, or we can learn to master them, to make conscious choices that are in line with our values. He emphasizes self-awareness, recognizing when those desires are pulling us away from our true selves, and then making choices that reflect our deepest values.
He's saying we need to become masters of our inner fire, to harness that energy and channel it in a way that serves us and allows us to connect more authentically.
Precisely. And he also talks about polishing the mirror of the heart.
Ah, yes. I love that image. So evocative. What does it actually mean to polish the mirror of the heart? So imagine a mirror, right? But it's covered in dust. You can't really see your reflection that well. It's distorted, blurry. And Saadi is suggesting the same thing happens with our hearts. When they're clouded by ego, desires, limiting beliefs, we can't see ourselves honestly. And then we operate with this distorted view of ourselves and the world. And that leads to those hypocritical behaviors. And it prevents genuine connection.
So polishing is about cultivating self-awareness, clearing away those inner obstacles so we can see ourselves and the world more clearly and honestly.
Exactly. And that clarity is key for true humility.
Humility. That's a tough one these days. It's so easy to get caught up in wanting to appear humble. But Saadi seems to be talking about something deeper than that.
Oh, yeah, for sure. He was very clear that true humility isn't about putting ourselves down or denying our worth. It's about aligning our actions with our values, even when no one's watching.
So it's not about seeking external validation, but about living in accordance with our internal compass.
Yes. He even wrote, "Whoever adorns himself with humility for people, his humility is arrogance." True humility comes from a place of self-awareness and honesty, not from a desire for approval.
That makes me think of something else Saadi wrote about, this idea of the self of proximity and the self of distance. Can you elaborate on those concepts?
Sure. So the self of proximity represents our truest essence. It's the part of us that's closest to truth, goodness, and virtue. It seeks genuine connection, meaning, and fulfillment. It's drawn to what is good and true. And it wants to express those qualities in the world.
So it's kind of like our highest self, the part of us that's aligned with our deepest values and aspirations.
Exactly. And then there's the self of distance. This part is all about ego and desires, and those worldly attachments that can pull us away from what truly matters. It feeds on the illusion of separation, the belief that we're not all connected, that our happiness depends on having more than others.
That voice inside that says we're not enough, that we need to prove ourselves to the world.
That's it. And it's always at odds with our self of proximity, creating this inner battle that we all experience.
That constant tug of war between our highest aspirations and those ego-driven desires. So how do we navigate this? How do we strengthen that self of proximity, that connection to our truest essence?
Saadi believed the more we nurture our self of proximity, the further we move away from that self of distance. It's about shifting our focus, making a conscious effort to cultivate that connection with our best selves. He encouraged us to be mindful of our thoughts and our actions, to pay attention to those recurring patterns of behavior and our emotional reactions, the things that keep popping up.
So it's about being present, more aware of what's happening in our inner world, instead of just going through life on autopilot.
Precisely. And he also reminds us we don't have to figure all of this out on our own. He encourages us to seek guidance from people wiser than us, from those who embody the qualities we admire.
Find mentors, teachers, friends who can help us see our blind spots and challenge us to grow.
Yeah, surround yourself with people that inspire you to be your best. But even with the best guidance, we're all human. We're going to stumble. We're going to get caught up in those ego-driven patterns.
It makes me wonder, what did Saadi say about those moments when we inevitably fall short? It's so easy to get discouraged when we mess up, beat ourselves up for not being perfect.
Thankfully, Saadi approaches this with a lot of compassion. He acknowledges that even people deeply connected to their true selves, even enlightened individuals, they still have moments of disconnect. It's not about reaching some perfect state of being, but about learning to navigate those ups and downs with awareness.
That's reassuring. No pressure to be perfect. It's more about how we react when we do mess up. Thinking back to that story in Baalbek, Saadi seemed frustrated, but he didn't give up. He kind of used it as a chance to reflect. He didn't blame the audience for not getting it. He looked inward instead. Did he ever talk about how to be more compassionate with ourselves, especially in those moments when we stumble?
Yeah, he did. Saadi uses the word istar to describe those times when we feel failed or hidden. When our vision is clouded and we're struggling to connect with the truth. It's like stumbling around in the dark, not sure where you're going.
Oh, I've been there for sure. Okay, so if that's istar, what's the opposite? What does it look like when we are connected to our self of proximity?
Saadi uses the word tajali. It describes those moments of revelation, those glimpses of truth where it all clicks and you feel deeply connected to something bigger than yourself. It's like a sudden flash of insight, a moment of clarity and deep understanding.
Those aha moments, like when the solution to a problem just pops into your head.
Yeah.
Or when you feel that sense of awe and wonder when you're out in nature.
Exactly. Those are glimpses of tajali. And he suggests that these moments happen more when we're living in alignment with our self of proximity, when our actions are guided by our values and we're acting from a place of genuine humility.
So the more we nurture humility, the more open we are to inspiration and connection. It makes me wonder, did Saadi ever talk about his struggles with Iqstar? Did he ever share any personal experiences where he felt lost or disconnected?
He doesn't really get into specific personal struggles, but he does emphasize that it's something we all go through. It's a universal experience. And he encourages us to practice self-compassion, recognizing that we're all human and we all make mistakes.
It's easy to get caught up in that self-judgment. But Saadi's saying we need to be kinder to ourselves, to see those stumbles as opportunities for learning and growth.
Exactly. It's about approaching our struggles with gentleness and acceptance. Remember, even the most polished mirror will eventually get dusty, and when that happens, we just have to polish it again.
Humility is an ongoing practice, not some end goal. It's about constantly coming back to those core values, to that self of proximity, even when we get off track.
You got it. And it's a practice that can transform not only our inner world, but also how we interact with the world around us. It can create more understanding, more compassion, more genuine connection.
It's all coming together now. Hypocrisy, the two selves, Istar and Tajali, polishing the mirror of the heart. It's all this deep inner work that Saadi is inviting us to do. Did he ever talk about how these ideas connect to our ability to make a positive impact on the world?
He did. He emphasized that our inner state is reflected in everything we do. The more we cultivate honesty and self-awareness and compassion, the more we're able to live authentically and connect more deeply with ourselves and others.
I feel like we've only scratched the surface of Saadi's wisdom. There's so much here, but I think we've laid a good foundation for understanding his main point, that the path to genuine connection starts with changing ourselves, with cultivating those qualities of the heart that help us to see ourselves and the world honestly and with more compassion. Thinking back to that Baalbek story again, do you think Saadi was able to find any solace or wisdom in that experience, even though his audience wasn't receptive?
Oh, absolutely. Saadi doesn't get caught up in self-righteousness or resentment. He asks himself, what can I learn from this? How can I grow?
It's powerful. It reminds us that even those who embody humility like Saadi still experience challenges and frustrations. It's how we respond that really matters.
His response to the Baalbek story shows his humility. He doesn't blame the audience. He focuses on his own growth and understanding.
It reminds us that we can share our wisdom and insights and experiences.
Yeah.
But we can't control how or when those seeds take root. All that matters is that we plant them.
Yeah. All we can do is plant those seeds and trust that they'll land where they need to.
It's freeing in a way. It frees us from trying to control everything and lets us focus on just showing up authentically and sharing our gifts.
Exactly. And when we do that, when we cultivate humility and let go of control, we open ourselves to those tajali moments, those unexpected bursts of grace that illuminate our path.
I love that. It's not about forcing our ideas on others or wanting praise, but about offering our gifts freely and trusting that they'll reach those who are ready.
Well said. It gets to the heart of true impact, recognizing that we're all connected. Even the smallest acts of kindness, of sharing, of connecting, genuinely can have ripple effects we might never fully understand.
That's such a hopeful thought. Even when we feel like our efforts are going unnoticed, those seeds are still being planted. And they might blossom when we least expect it.
Absolutely. Speaking of tajali, those moments of revelation, do you think there's a connection between tajali and humility?
That's a great question.
The scholars say those moments of revelation can be incredibly powerful and transformative, but we can't force them or control them. They're gifts, glimpses of truth that come when we're open and receptive.
It's not about striving for tajali, but about creating the conditions within ourselves to be more receptive to those moments.
Exactly, and that's where humility comes in. When we cultivate humility, we let go of the ego's need to control, to prove itself. We become more like empty vessels, ready to receive whatever wisdom the universe has to offer.
We surrender to something larger than ourselves, and we open ourselves to this flow of wisdom that we couldn't access on our own.
That's a beautiful way to put it. I think that's what Saadi is trying to show us, the transformative power of humility, to connect us to our true selves and that divine spark within each of us.
That's a beautiful image, becoming an empty vessel, letting go of trying to control everything. It's kind of a paradox, isn't it? The more we surrender, the more open we become to those moments of grace, those glimpses of truth.
It is a paradox, and that's part of what makes Saadi's teaching so powerful. He pushes us to embrace those paradoxes, to let go of our rigid thinking, and to open up to a deeper understanding of ourselves and the world.
It's like he's saying true wisdom comes from humility, and surrender, not forcing things or ego. Thinking back to the story from Baalbek, even though those people weren't receptive, Saadi didn't get bitter or resentful. He saw it as an opportunity for growth. What can we learn from how he reacted in that situation?
His response in Baalbek really shows us what he was teaching. He didn't give up on those people or on himself. He chose to see it as a chance to learn, to deepen his practice of humility and trust in the process, even if he might not see the results.
That's a good reminder for all of us, especially when we feel like our efforts aren't being noticed or appreciated. It's not about getting validation. It's about staying true to ourselves and trusting that our actions, no matter how small, are contributing to something bigger. It's like what we were talking about with Waqt. Sometimes we just need to be present and trust that the right connections will happen.
Exactly. And I think that's a good place to end our discussion. Saadi's story and his teachings give us a really profound understanding of what it means to truly connect with others, to live with intention and purpose, and to nurture those qualities of the heart that allow us to experience life fully in all its ups and downs.
This has been such an insightful deep dive. We've just scratched the surface of Saadi's wisdom, but I'm leaving feeling inspired, and I have a better understanding of the power of humility. Before we wrap up, what would you say is the main takeaway for our listeners today?
Saadi's work reminds us that the journey toward real connections starts from within. It's about being self-aware, mastering our inner desires, and polishing that mirror of the heart. It's about accepting both our self of proximity and our self of distance, and navigating those times of struggle with kindness and a desire to learn and grow.
Beautifully put. Ultimately, it's about remembering that even though we can't control the outcome, we can always choose to be kind and wise and compassionate, and trust that those things will find their way to the people who need them.
Exactly. And when we do that, we create a space within ourselves and in the world for those moments of revelation and connection that light our way and inspire us to live more authentic and meaningful lives.
Thank you so much for joining us on this journey into Saadi's wisdom. We hope his teachings have given you something to think about and helped you on your own path toward connection and compassion and being true to yourself. We've still got a lot more to explore from Arafat, so be sure to tune in next time as we continue to unveil wisdom together